Have you ever looked at an old, gnarled oak tree standing alone in a field? A tree whose bark is a roadmap of lightning strikes, droughts, and bitter winters. It doesn't stand in a pristine, manicured forest. It stands alone. For decades it grew in solitude, its roots pushing through rock, its branches wrestling with the wind. To a passerby for most of its life, it was just a solitary, struggling thing, not part of a pair, not part of a grove, alone. But then one day you see it. After a century of solitude, another tree has grown just far enough away, not crowding it but in companionship, and you realize the truth. The first oak wasn't just alone. It was undergoing a process. It was becoming so profoundly itself, so strong and deep-rooted, that any other tree planted too close too soon would have been dwarfed, choked out, or broken in the shadow of its struggle. It had to first conquer its own patch of earth, master its own resilience, and become an unshakable monument to survival. Only then could it exist in a partnership of equals. This is the brutal and beautiful truth behind the title of this exploration. %% Why Some Souls Only Find Love Late in Life, Carl Jung %%. We are fed a myth from birth, a myth of frantic, youthful coupling, a myth that if you haven't found your other half by a certain age, you are defective, you are behind, you are losing a race. Carl Jung, one of the most profound explorers of the human soul, would call this a dangerous lie. He would tell you that for certain souls, the ones destined for a deeper-than-average journey, finding true conscious love early in life is not only unlikely, it is impossible. It would be a betrayal of their primary purpose. This isn't going to be a comforting pat on the back. This is a brutally honest excavation of the soul's timetable. We are going to dismantle the societal shame around late love and reframe it for what it truly is. A sign of a more arduous, more profound, and ultimately more sacred mission. You were not failing at love. You were enrolled in a masterclass of the self, a curriculum so demanding that it had to be completed in solitude. Today, we map out that curriculum. We will explore the deep psychological architecture that dictates why some of the most complex souls must first walk a long road alone before they can finally walk it with another. This is not a story of a deficit. It is the story of the great work. First, we must confront the foundational principle. You weren't failing at love. You were on a mandatory solo quest of individuation. The most fundamental drive of the human psyche, according to Jung, is not to find a partner. It is the drive toward individuation. This is the lifelong process of becoming the whole, complete, and unique individual you were born to be. It is the journey of integrating all the disparate, conflicting, and hidden parts of yourself. The conscious and the unconscious, the masculine and the feminine, the light and the dark, into a functioning, unified whole. For some, this process is relatively straightforward. For others, the raw materials are more volatile, the inner conflicts more seismic. Their task is not to simply build a house, but to construct a cathedral out of chaos. To attempt to build a two-person cathedral before you've even mastered your own architectural plans is to guarantee its collapse. Early relationships for a soul on this difficult path are almost never about true love. They are about outsourcing. You are unconsciously seeking someone to carry the parts of yourself you are unable or unwilling to hold. You seek a partner to be your confidence, your stability, your emotional regulator, your social bridge. You are not looking for a partner, you are looking for a missing piece of your own psychic infrastructure. And this is doomed to fail every single time. Because no other human being can or should be a prosthetic for your own soul. Consider the story of a man we'll call Julian. From a young age, Julian was a creative powerhouse, a whirlwind of ideas, music, and art. But he was also profoundly chaotic. He couldn't manage his finances, his schedule, or his own emotional weather. His life was a series of brilliant flashes followed by dark, depressive collapses. In his 20s and 30s, Julian's love life was a mirror of this chaos. He was drawn to intensely organized, stable, and grounded women. He craved their calm. He would enter these relationships, and for a while it would work. His partner would manage his calendar, make sure bills were paid, and provide a sanctuary from his own inner storm. He would call it love, but it wasn't. It was psychic dependency. He had outsourced the logos principle, the part of the psyche responsible for order, reason, and structure, to his partners. Inevitably, the relationships would crumble. The women would grow exhausted, resentful of being a manager instead of a partner. They would feel their own vibrancy being drained to fuel his. And Julian, when they left, would collapse entirely, decrying his bad luck in love, never realizing the fundamental error. He wasn't looking for a lover, he was looking for an external administrator for his own life. His solitude began not by choice but by force. After a particularly devastating breakup in his late 30s, he had a complete breakdown. He was left with no one to organize his life, no one to soothe his panics. He was alone with the terrifying, untamed chaos of his own nature. This forced solitude was his crucible. For years he struggled. He learned painfully and with many failures how to build his own internal structure. He learned to use a calendar. He learned to budget. He learned to sit with his own anxiety without needing someone else to talk him down. He learned to be his own anchor in his own storm. It was the hardest work of his life. He didn't date. The very thought was exhausting. He was too busy building the foundations of his own being. By his late 40s, Julian was a different man. The chaotic genius was still there, but now it was channeled, focused. He was a successful artist, not because of some muse, but because he had built the discipline to support his gift. He was whole. And it was then, not seeking it, that he met someone, a woman who was not his opposite, but his peer. She was creative and passionate herself, but also grounded. Their connection wasn't based on need, but on resonance. They were two complete solar systems, now orbiting each other, rather than a black hole trying to suck life from a nearby star. He had to complete the solo quest of individuation before he could even be capable of a partnership of equals. The brutal truth is this: if your early life was a string of failed relationships, it's possible you weren't failing. You were being taught again and again the same lesson. You cannot build a life with two people until you can build one for one. The loneliness was not a punishment. It was the classroom. The actionable step here is a radical form of self-inventory. Ask yourself with brutal honesty, what functions am I trying to outsource to a partner? Is it my self-esteem, my financial security, my social life, my sense of purpose? Write down every single thing you believe a partner will give you or fix for you. This list is your work. This is the curriculum of your individuation. Your task is to learn, piece by painful piece, how to provide every single one of those things for yourself. Only when that list is empty are you truly ready. The second, and this is where the work gets truly deep, you could not find love because you were hiding from half of yourself. You had not yet faced your shadow. The shadow, in Jungian terms, is everything within you that you have repressed and disowned. It is your anger, your greed, your envy, your cowardice, your secret desires, your untamed power. It is not evil. It is simply the part of you that your conscious ego, your family, and your society deemed unacceptable. So you locked it in the basement of your psyche and threw away the key. But the shadow does not disappear. It seeps out. And its favorite way to manifest is through projection. You don't see the shadow in yourself, you see it everywhere else. You despise the arrogance in your boss, not realizing it's your own disowned ambition. You are disgusted by the laziness of a friend, blind to your own repressed need for rest and play. And most powerfully, you either fall in love with or declare war on people who carry your shadow for you. True intimacy is the act of being fully seen and fully seeing another. This is utterly impossible as long as your shadow remains unconscious. You cannot be fully seen if you are hiding half of your own being, and you cannot fully see another because your vision is clouded by the projections of your own inner demons. Let's imagine a woman named Elena. All her life, Elena was the good girl, responsible, kind, self-sacrificing. She built her entire identity around being helpful, pleasing, and never, ever causing conflict. She consciously despised people who were selfish, assertive, or demanding. She saw them as monsters. Her relationships followed a predictable, tragic pattern. She was a magnet for deeply narcissistic and selfish men. They would take, and she would give and give, feeling righteous in her sacrifice. She would complain to her friends about how she always attracted these takers. The relationship would end when she was completely depleted, a husk of a person. She would then recover, rebuild her good girl persona, and attract another one like a moth to a flame. What Elena could not see was that these men were not just random bad luck. They were messengers from her own shadow. Deep in her psychic basement, locked away, was her own assertiveness, her own needs, her own ambition, her own right to say no, her own healthy selfishness. Because she had disowned these parts of herself so completely, she had no defense against them in the outer world. More than that, she was unconsciously fascinated by them. She was drawn to the very power she had forbidden in herself. Her relationships were a gruesome pantomime where she paid other people to act out her own disowned self. Her breakthrough came in her 40s, not through a relationship, but through rage. After being passed over for a promotion she deserved in favor of a less competent but more aggressive male colleague, something inside her snapped. The good girl persona cracked and years of repressed fury erupted. It was terrifying for her. She thought she was going insane, but this was the beginning of her healing. She started to work not on finding a better man, but on her own shadow. She started to ask, where is my selfishness? Where is my ambition? She learned to say no at work. It felt like setting off a bomb, but the world didn't end. She took a pottery class, something she considered frivolous, and discovered a fierce, messy creativity she never knew she had. She learned to voice her own needs, to take up space, to be in small doses, the very thing she had always despised. As she integrated this shadow, a strange thing happened. The narcissistic men vanished from her radar. They were no longer attractive. They looked, for the first time, not like powerful figures, but like petulant children. She no longer needed someone else to be assertive for her because she was learning to be assertive for herself. When she did find a partner in her late 40s, it was a man who was kind, yes, but also a man who respected her boundaries because she finally had them. He was attracted not to her self-sacrifice, but to her newfound strength. It was a love born not of projection, but of mutual, clear-eyed respect between two whole people. She had to go to war with her own demons before she could ever find peace with another person. The consequence of ignoring the shadow is a life sentence of repeating the same relational drama. You will forever be fighting with your partner over issues that are actually a civil war inside your own soul. You will sabotage love because you cannot tolerate seeing your own disowned flaws reflected back at you. The actionable step is shadow hunting. It's uncomfortable but non-negotiable. First, identify a person or type of person who triggers an irrationally strong negative reaction in you. What specific trait infuriates you? Is it their arrogance, their victimhood, their loudness, their neediness? Write it down. Now, with a level of honesty that feels like a betrayal of your own ego, ask this question: where and how does this exact trait exist in me, even in a 1% dose? When have I acted this way? When have I wanted to? The goal isn't to approve of the trait, but to simply acknowledge its existence within you. This is how you take back your projections. This is how you begin to see people as they are, not as screens for your own inner movie. Third, the inner ghost had to die. Your love was delayed by the necessary maturation of the anima or animus. Every man carries within him an unconscious feminine archetype, the anima. Every woman carries an unconscious masculine archetype, the animus. These are not about gender identity, they are about the psychological energies we all contain. The anima in a man governs relationship, creativity, and the inner world of emotion. The animus in a woman governs logic, structure, assertiveness, and the outer world of action. In a young, undeveloped person, this inner figure is a ghost. It's an immature, fantasy-based composite of parental figures, cultural ideals, and mythological images. A young man doesn't fall in love with a real woman, he projects his undeveloped anima onto her. He sees a goddess, a damsel in distress, a mystical muse, or a perfect mother. He is in love with a projection from his own soul. A young woman does the same with her animus. She seeks a knight in shining armor, a brooding Heathcliff, a brilliant intellectual savior, or a powerful father figure. She is in love with a fantasy. These relationships are destined for disillusionment. The real person can never live up to the projected god or goddess. The moment they show a human flaw, they are messy, they are uncertain, they have a bad day, the projection shatters and the love evaporates, often replaced by bitterness and a sense of betrayal. The long, often lonely road of the first half of life is the very thing that matures this inner figure. Heartbreak, career challenges, failure, and experience, these are the tools that transform the anima animus. The fantasy-based ghost dies a slow death, and in its place a more realistic, wise, and integrated figure emerges. The anima in a man evolves from a flighty dream girl into Sophia, the archetype of deep wisdom, partnership, and soul. The animus in a woman evolves from a cartoon hero into a figure of conscious integrity, supportive strength, and clear-sighted counsel. Only when this maturation has occurred can you finally see a real human being. You stop looking for someone to fulfill a myth and start looking for someone to share a life. Consider the classic story of the academic, a man we'll call Arthur. For decades, Arthur's life was his library. His relationships with women were a reflection of his relationship with books. He collected them. Specifically, he was drawn to women who embodied his undeveloped anima, ethereal, artistic, chaotic women whom he saw as his muses. He didn't want a conversation, he wanted inspiration. He would shower them with attention, romanticize their every quirk, and write poetry about them. But the moment the woman expressed a concrete need, help with her taxes, a desire for a stable commitment, a complaint about his emotional distance, the spell was broken. She was no longer a perfect muse, she was just a person, and he would lose interest, moving on to find a new, unblemished projection. He left a trail of confused and hurt women, all the while seeing himself as a tragic romantic, misunderstood in his quest for ideal beauty. Arthur reached his 50s alone, surrounded by his books, feeling a profound and hollow loneliness. The muse fantasy had grown thin, it offered no warmth, no genuine companionship. Through this painful emptiness, his anima began to change. The years of disillusionment forced him to look inward. The inner feminine figure was no longer a giggling nymph. She was a quiet, sober presence. She didn't offer him fleeting inspiration. She offered him a connection to his own buried feelings, his own humanity. One day, at a university function, he met a colleague, a fellow professor in her 50s. She wasn't a muse. She was sharp, witty, had two grown children, a mortgage, and a wicked sense of humor about the absurdities of academic life. In his youth, he would have dismissed her as unromantic, but now, with his matured anima, he saw her for the first time. He saw her intelligence, her resilience, her depth. He wasn't attracted to a fantasy he could project onto her. He was attracted to her. To the real, complex, flawed, and brilliant person standing before him. Their courtship was not a whirlwind of poetry. It was a dialogue, a meeting of minds and eventually of souls. It was a love that would have been impossible for him at 30, because the 30-year-old Arthur was still in love with a ghost in his own head. He had to spend decades chasing ghosts and finding only emptiness before he was ready to love a real woman. The brutal consequence of clinging to an immature anima or animus is a life of serial disappointment. You will doom yourself to an endless search for a mythical creature that doesn't exist, all while ignoring the real, imperfect, and potentially wonderful human beings all around you. The actionable step is to perform an autopsy on your fantasies. Write down in detail your perfect partner, every trait, every quality. Now go through that list and sort it into two columns. Column A, realistic human traits. Column B, mythological or fantasy traits. Things like always knows what I'm thinking, or will rescue me from my life, or has no flaws. Go directly into column B. This is your ghost. Your work is to grieve the loss of this ghost and begin the conscious process of cultivating the positive qualities of your anima animus within yourself. If you want a partner with courage, cultivate your own courage. If you want a partner with wisdom, seek your own. You must become the person you want to attract. Fourth and finally, we arrive at the most potent truth. Your soul was being forged, not neglected. The years of solitude were the alchemical crucible. Ancient alchemists sought to turn lead into gold. The uninitiated believe this was a literal metallurgical process. Jung understood it was a profound metaphor for the transformation of the human soul. The lead is the prima materia, the raw, unconscious, heavy, and chaotic state of the young psyche. The gold is the individuated self, whole, conscious, and incorruptible. This transformation is not gentle. It is a process of fire. The years you spent alone, the years of heartbreak, of professional failure, of wrestling with your demons, of feeling lost and unloved, this was not time wasted. This was the alchemy. This was the crucible. The alchemical stages map perfectly onto the journey of the late blooming soul. There is the negrito, the blackening. This is the descent into the shadow, the depression, the dark night of the soul where old identities dissolve and you feel completely lost. It's the period where you are convinced you are broken and unlovable. Then comes the albedo, the whitening. This is the stage of purification, of washing away the dross. This is the work of therapy, of self-reflection, of shadow hunting. It's when you begin to see things clearly for the first time, separating your projections from reality. It's painful, like washing a wound, but it's a cleansing pain. Finally, there is the rubedo, the reddening. This is the dawn. It's the return of life, passion, and spirit, but on a new, conscious level. It is the integration of all the parts. The lead has been burned away, the silver has been purified, and now the gold emerges. The soul is now whole, resilient, and incandescent. A love that is found after this process is fundamentally different from the love of the young. Youthful love is often a meeting of two pieces of lead, two prima materias clashing together, each hoping the other will magically transform them. It is full of projection, need, and unconscious contracts. The love of the alchemically forged soul is a coniunctio, a sacred union. It is the meeting of two people who have already turned their own lead into gold. They do not come to the relationship to be completed, but to share their completeness. They do not come to be fixed, but to be witnessed in their wholeness. The attraction is not based on a frantic need to fill a void, but on the calm, powerful resonance of two souls who recognize the fire the other has walked through. They don't need to impress each other with their successes. They connect over their healed scars. They can offer a level of acceptance and understanding that is impossible for those who have not yet done their own inner work. They can love the other's shadow because they have befriended their own. They can honor the other's solitude because they have sanctified their own. This love is not a frantic, desperate beginning. It is a peaceful, powerful arrival. It is less a raging fire and more the steady, unwavering heat of a forge that has been burning for decades. It is indestructible because it is a union between two indestructible people. The brutal truth is that you may have prayed for love for years, and the universe, in its profound wisdom, said, "No, not yet, you are not ready, the work is not done." The solitude and the pain were the answers to your prayer. It was the very process required to make you capable of receiving the kind of profound, conscious love you were actually asking for. The final, actionable step is one of radical reframing. Look back at your timeline. Take your most painful period of loneliness, your most devastating heartbreak. Stop telling the story of what I lost or why I was unloved. Start telling the story of what was being forged in me. What lead was being burned away? Was it your neediness, your arrogance, your naivete, your fear? What gold was being created? Was it your resilience, your compassion, your wisdom, your independence? Your unbreakable core. See your past not as a resume of failures, but as your alchemical journal. Honor the fire. It was your greatest teacher and your most loyal ally. It made you who you are. Now, to conclude, let's shatter the final illusion. You are not late. You have not missed the boat. You were simply on a different, longer, and more challenging voyage. A voyage that required you to be your own captain, your own navigator, and your own ship. The journey you have been on was not a detour from love. It was the only possible path to it. It was the path of individuation where you had to become whole on your own. It was the descent into the shadow where you had to face your own darkness to be able to stand in the light with another. It was the long, slow death of the fantasy partner, the anima or animus, so that you could finally see and love a real human being. And it was the alchemical fire of suffering that forged your soul into something unbreakable, something golden. Stop comparing your timeline to the timelines of others. Theirs was a different curriculum for a different degree. Yours was the doctorate program in the human soul. The loneliness was your dissertation. The heartbreaks were your final exams. Do not go forward seeking love out of desperation or a sense of lack. That is the energy of the old you, the leaden self. Go forward in sovereignty. You have returned to your own kingdom, having conquered the dragons in your own lands. You are the king or queen of your own integrated psyche. The castle is secure. The foundations are deep. And now you are not looking for someone to rescue you from the castle. You are ready to welcome an equal, another sovereign to share the view from the throne. The love that finds you now is not a consolation prize for a life half-lived. It is the grand prize. It is the ultimate reward given only to those who had the staggering courage to complete the great work first. You did not arrive late. You have arrived precisely on time.